So, in a recent turn of events, the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action, and they also struck down Joe Biden's student loan relief program, and they ruled in favor of a web developer, a Christian web developer, who did not want to provide his services to gay couples. So, I'm more interested in the affirmative action being ruled against, and I'm going to focus on that in this video. So yesterday, as I said, the Supreme Court, they ruled that affirmative action is unconstitutional because it violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. I mean, which makes sense because anytime you're basing your admissions or focusing your admissions on race and you're admitting, let's say, Black and Hispanic students who have a lower GPA and lower test scores than on average white and Asian students, but you admit them because of this notion or because of the idea that they had to work harder for their lower GPA and SAT scores. That necessarily discriminates against white and Asian students. You know, um, and so basically, uh, yeah, they wrote for the actually, let's see here. So it was a 6-3 majority ruling for both the student for fair admissions versus Harvard and the students for fair admissions versus UNC. Now, I'd heard about the uh, Asian students lawsuit against Harvard because all these there are a bunch of Asian students with really good GPAs and really good SAT scores that made them more than qualified for Harvard, kept getting rejected. And and I could see why they'd be angry because they're more than qualified for to be admitted to Harvard, and they've shown through their GPA and SAT scores that they can excel or at the very least do pretty well in academic setting like Harvard. And but um, but they get rejected in favor of other minority students who didn't do as well in school and on their SAT scores. I heard a statistic somewhere. I believe it was I think his name is Kenny Wu. I probably got the name wrong, but he mentioned how um, in order for Asian students to get into really competitive schools or Ivy League schools, uh, at the same rate or to be considered over a black student, their SAT scores have to be 200 points higher. Um, so obviously Justice Sotomayor, Kagan, and Justice Jackson disagreed with this decision. And I could be wrong, but I'm going to guess that you know their ideology favors things like equity heavily, not just equality of opportunity, which I think a lot of people, in fact, I think all Americans agree that equality of opportunity is a good thing. But I'm going to guess Sotomayor and Jackson, they're very much in favor of equity, which is, basically when you take a look at the disparity in outcomes and based on that really flimsy suspect evidence, come to the conclusion that, there's still inequality and uh, you need to, take either resources or opportunities from other groups that are outperforming and evenly distribute it based on the results and the outcomes. You know, and I think it goes without saying that you can't measure the opportunities that are available based on the statistical outcomes. But uh, dozens of major corporations across various industries took interest in this case, includes Apple, Google, General Motors, General Dynamics, Dell, Starbucks. Um, those companies contended that diversity in higher education ultimately helps their business by providing a diverse pool from which they can recruit. No, there's two things here. Um, diversity in skin color or background, yeah, that doesn't, that's, I don't think you should be emphasizing that when you're like a job recruiter, or you're a company or business that's looking to hire new applicants or new potential new employees. Um, because, when you're emphasizing diversity, you may, what you may lack or end up, um, uh, what you end up like sacrificing ultimately is, skill set, or, competency at a job. Because if, when you decide to emphasize diversity, you're sort of turning a blind eye to uh, certain skill sets that uh, applicants might have over other skill sets, because one applicant might have a certain skin color that you decide you need more representation of. And also, this kind of ties into another statistic I found, or another point that was brought up with regards to the mismatch theory. So basically, and this is relevant because, in law school as a postgraduate, after, it's a opportunity that you get after your bachelor's. Um, so basically, uh, in graduate school or in law school, and competitive law schools, especially such as like Harvard, Black students drop out at, I think, around a 20 to 25% rate, which is significant because, due to the mismatch theory, and due to emphasizing, you know, the need for diversity, or the need for non-white students, you know, you end up getting um, students who can't, uh, who aren't ready for law school, or especially competitive law schools, or who aren't suited, or don't have the academic readiness, I'll say, to succeed or thrive in, or excel in a uh, in something like law school. And that's kind of the same thing that could happen with when these companies emphasize diversity over, merit or skill set, or I guess broadly human capital. What are you bringing to the table? Because if you're, let's say, these companies are looking at several colleges, I don't know, in like the Mid-Atlantic or Northeast, and they see that there's a bunch of Black applicants or Hispanic applicants from a certain set of colleges, and they decide, oh, these are non-white student or graduates who have their bachelors, so we should, we'll hire them over uh, the either equally qualified or more qualified, sometimes more qualified white students or Asian graduates. What you end up getting is potentially people who, uh, don't necessarily have the skill set to do these jobs, or excel in this kind of career, let's say in finance, or on Wall Street, or even in Silicon Valley company like Apple or Google. Um, they went on to argue that doing away with the policy would also weaken the military's pool of eligible college-trained recruits. I don't see how that follows. No, we should like with the military, in the same way that you should do, or when you're talking about the military, you should, like, graduate school, or postgraduate job, you should emphasize competency or skill set rather than um, diversity. And also, just thought of this, when these schools are talking about the need to emphasize diversity, there's um, two ways you can go with that. There's diversity of background, or skin color, or diversity of thought or ideas. And me personally, I think that it's way more important, especially at this point, to emphasize diversity of ideas and thought because the whole point of going to college is to have your ideas challenged and to like interact with new people who have a different worldview, and sort of have your ideas challenged and like sort of bounce ideas back and forth between people with different worldviews. And you shouldn't colleges should not be a safe space for people who disagree with a certain worldview. And we gotta colleges have to teach students how to not get flustered or triggered by certain ideas that they don't like or they deemed as problematic or whatever. So I think uh, ultimately ultimately having diversity of ideas and thought will lead to like a more rigorous critical thinking process that within students, which ultimately gives them better that gives them that allows them to think about the world more complicated or more it allows them to think about the world in a more sophisticated and nuanced way. um Court acknowledged that its prior rulings permitted race-based admissions, saying it did so only within the confines of excuse me, only within the confines of narrow restrictions. I believe what this is referring to is, you know, colleges like whenever I think there was a court case in like 2003 that ruled in favor of affirmative action where colleges said that race was one factor that was considered along with the a multitude of other factors. Um, and I still think that's an issue because, again, even if you say race is one factor in addition to GPA, SAT scores, extracurricular activities, college essay, etc., um, it still necessarily discriminates against white and Asian students because the deciding factor, even if like you have two students of different races, let's say one Hispanic, one Asian, they all have this, both of them have the same GPA, SAT, and uh, both well written college essays. It still necessarily discriminates or based on race and the deciding factors based on race because you're picking the Hispanic due to a need or a quota or a need for more Hispanic students when maybe you should be looking at how interesting one or both of these applicants are. Like, for example, let's say the Hispanic student was 4.0 GPA, or even let's say 3.6 GPA, with really good SAT scores, a really well written college essay that shows off his creativeness and his ability to think critically. And in addition, his extracurriculars were, he was like on varsity basketball and he was in National Honor Society and he, it's things like that. And then the Asian student, let's say similar GPA, I don't know, like 3.6 to 3.8. Um, or you can even say both of them at 4.0. Really, again, point is, he had Asian student also had good SAT scores, um, really good college essay, but he also, his extracurriculars were chess club, fencing, and, let's say he was in like a biology club or something. And, college admissions should like weigh like, oh, even though they're similar, have almost identical academic credentials, we think this Asian student's more interesting because he was in the biology club and he wants to have a career according to his essay, in the medical field, or he wants to become a doctor. We think it's really interesting that he's, you know, he's already started early with uh, his preparation for his biology major and his love for all things biology by being in this bio club. Or with the Hispanic student, they think it's interesting that he's on varsity basketball, but he writes really, really well. And he, in addition to being an athlete, he has a keen interest in like English or English literature. So like, weighing factors like that, um, you know, as opposed to like the deciding factor being based on race. Now, that was an extremely long rant, or I was rambling, but point is, weigh other factors, even if they have similar credentials. Uh, University programs, the court said, must comply with strict scrutiny. The highest standards of review apply to constitutional questions. In writing for the majority, Roberts said the universities therefore may never use race as a stereotype or negative, and at some point they must end. And yeah, as I've said before in this video, and I'm going to continue to emphasize, it violates civil rights. Affirmative action technically violates the Civil Rights Act and 14th Amendment because it necessarily discriminates against certain groups of students based on race. The challenger in both cases, Students for Fair Admission. So this is the student organization that was the plaintiff in both Supreme Court cases. Argued that affirmative action is illegal in public and private college settings because it penalizes equally qualified Asian American and other minority applicants. Yeah, and I don't know how much it's affected like South Asian students, probably a lot because, or a significant amount because like East Asians, South Asians tend to, South Asian families emphasize education and they really want their student or their South Asian parents want their kids to do well, like extremely well in school and go on to like have a career in a lucrative field that requires a ton of college education. So, but regardless, like I've said before, I could see why like Asian students would be really pissed off that they uh they were passed over or rejected by really competitive colleges that could allow them uh a gives them the starting off point, or is like the key, getting into these colleges is like the key for their careers in like a lucrative STEM field. um yeah, I can see why they would be upset that they lose that opportunity due to like initiatives involving diversity. All right, let's see. Like Edward Blum makes the same point that I made. UNC consideration of race violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, which bars government entities and public universities from discriminating based on race. So, yeah, I wonder. I mean, I don't know these numbers offhand. I wonder what the percentage of, or yeah, what the percentage of affirmative action admissions is in like let's say some elite, doesn't have to be an Ivy League school, but like some elite uh northeastern or New England school versus like a state school such as like one of the University of Florida or one of the state universities of Pennsylvania. I wonder what like what those numbers look like between the two types of universities. Um, let's see. Okay, so yeah, this is the 03 lawsuit that I mentioned earlier, Gruder versus Bollinger, which held that the University of Michigan's law school could consider race as a factor in admissions, so long as its practice was narrowly tailored to further a compelling interest in obtaining the educational benefits that flow from a diverse student body. Let's see. So long as its practice was narrowly tailored to further a compelling interest in obtaining the educational benefits that flow from a diverse student body. So I guess there's University of Michigan um, could have like plausible deniability with having race as a major factor in admissions by saying they want their students to excel in academics or in law school, but while they have the goal for a diverse student body. But again, with the goal in just having diversity in skin color, does lead to uh, does lead to the issues such as the mismatch theory, which I brought up earlier. With 20 to 25% of Black law school students dropping out, and that is not uh, um, you know that isn't uh, that does not demonstrate the law school students or all the vast majority or even all of law school students thriving or uh, excelling in law school. In fact, it shows there's an issue. Okay, yeah, that's pretty much it. Um, so yeah, actually, uh, should mention full disclosure, I am half Hispanic, so most likely I did, yeah, like most likely I did benefit from affirmative action. So that's why before I was kind of agnostic on the issue of affirmative action because you know, I did benefit from it, but the more you know I look into it and the more I hear from like Asian students who have brought lawsuits against universities and um and ever since like it was overturned yesterday and I started like really started to think about it more. Um, I don't affirmative action does not lead to better educational outcomes, and it ultimately it leads to um, issues such as uh, white and Asian students losing out on opportunities that they were dreaming of since like high school or before. Um, these opportunities within uh, university that that's a starting point for their a career that they want to go into, and then that dream is shot down because they were passed over due to quote unquote diversity. Um, while there is an argument to be made that it made sense back in like the late 60s, early 70s due to um, redlining and Jim Crow just ending and there being, you know, for the first time, uh, black students uh, had like opportunity to go to these schools, but they were coming from impoverished backgrounds due to, like I said, redlining. It, it might affirmative action might have made sense uh, back then to address that, but I think in the 21st century it doesn't really make sense because uh, you know the disparities in poverty between uh, blacks and other racial groups have also been addressed with things like the Community Reinvestment Act, the Fair Housing Act, um, also things like Head Start, which can address like early childhood educational attainment and opportunities, which then uh, allow for Black students to progress through primary and secondary school, and they because the potential like educational disparities are addressed early on in childhood with the Head Start program. You know, Black students can then have the tools to like uh, have academic success in uh, elementary, middle, and high school, which then allows them to have actual like academic merit and academic accomplishment, which allows them to get in to competitive universities based on merit. And there are Black students that have these merits and are get into competitive universities based on their merit because they have really good GPAs and SAT scores, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but yeah, the point is that's how all students should be judged, and race should not be emphasized. Um, and then we there's like several rabbit holes or lines of uh, yeah, lines of thought or conversation we could go down, but such as uh, like how to address uh, the like schools in inner city Black neighborhoods, and how to improve education within these neighborhoods. I personally think that that starts at the home. You have to parents have to be more involved in their kids' education. Because throwing money at school districts has been shown to like not exactly work because they're I believe that Black schools or predominantly Black schools receive more funding than white schools on average. But regardless, those are my thoughts on the Supreme Court case. We got to emphasize diversity of thought and merit and academic achievement over, superficial things such as race or ethnic background. But yeah, I was definitely shocked by this decision. I'm sure a lot of people weren't shocked, but yeah, hopefully, colleges and universities start going in the right direction with regards to uh, academic excellence and diversity of thought.